have a fleet of vehicles that are used by the staff. So about 2 years ago, the department formed a committee and we were looking at how the cars were assigned and used. And we also wanted to explore renewable energy, and Tompkins County government has made a commitment to reduction of climate changing gases in our buildings and infrastructure, including our vehicles. We took that opportunity to explore what the options were. The committee basically decided was to do sort of a phased in approach. The fleet was approximately 15 vehicles at that time. We talked about it and looked at the various options. There were some concerns among the users because they didn't have personal experience with electric vehicles. If they would go up and down the hills in the area, how would they work in the winter, how much the range was. Partly to ameliorate some of those concerns and partly to just make better decisions in terms of how the fleet might grow in the future, we decided to buy 3 hybrid vehicles, Chevrolet Volts, and 2 full electric Nissan Leafs. The idea was that would give us a sense of the balance of vehicles that we might need in the future. In general, most of the trips taken by staff are not very long. People are going 12, 15 miles per trip. Some of us are going maybe 60, 70, 80 miles, 90 miles in a day. That would be the upper range. Occasionally we have to go to meetings or conferences in Albany or Syracuse.
We have an all-staff meeting twice a year, and it was announced at that by Frank Kruppa, our public health director. And he answered questions that people had, and he provided updates at subsequent all-staff meetings and continued to answer questions. We were sent emails with videos that showed us how to use different features that don't really exist in conventional cars. In environmental health, we did have one staff meeting where we went out to the cars and test drove them around. So basically the idea with that is that you have one pedal that you're putting your foot down to accelerate, and as you take it off, it brakes automatically, so you don't move your foot over to the brake. And it takes a little bit to get used to, but you get used to it surprisingly quickly. And I like that. I think it's fun. Like at the very first is that you don't have a key, you just put your foot on the brake and then you press the power button. And so if you don't know that, it takes a long time to figure out how to turn on the car. The other thing that was like a little different that I kind of liked was that it shows instantaneously how much energy the car is using. So I found myself kind of trying to drive in a way that used less energy. And then you can see as you're braking, it putting energy back into the car, which is cool. And I also like with the regenerative braking, you can actually like recharge the battery noticeable amounts. Like if I get into a car and it's not fully charged and I'm going down the hill into Ithaca, I'll have like 2 or 3 more miles on the battery than when I started.
Both of these cars have regenerative braking. On the Volt, however, you have to press a button or handle on the back of the steering wheel as you're braking to effectuate the regenerative braking, which is really not an intuitive way of doing it. And I think it puts people off because it makes it more complicated. It's just not driving a car. It's another piece of technology.
Anytime there's one available, I'll take that one. So probably like 2/3 to 3/4 of the time, I'll take that for work.
It was interesting to see the evolution of use. Electric and the hybrid car were at one end of the parking lot because that's where the charging stations were put, and the traditional gas cars were at the other end of the parking lot. And if you looked in the morning or later in the day, you would see the gas cars gone and the hybrid and electrics mostly parked. A couple of users, early adopters let's call them, were using those consistently, but they were a subsection of the staff at large. And then what you saw was over time, the first cars that would be gone from the parking lot, and the key, because all the keys are kept in one cabinet, would be the hybrids and electrics. And then the gas cars would go. As a matter of fact, people would look around and wait to see if maybe that electric car will come back before I need to go out, and I can take that one instead. As far as I'm concerned, that is, people's acceptance of it. It's now become the preferred. It probably was the case for some of us that we drove the car and had a passenger, a colleague as a passenger, and they might have seen that this is not rocket science. You just get in there, push the button, and drive like anything else. And yep, it's got a radio, and then realizing, I could probably do this. I think it was a little bit of that.
In terms of adjustments, there's not really a whole lot. Like if we were traveling outside of the county, then there'd be concerns about, recharging it or it running out of juice. But if we're just driving around the county, it never gets low enough that that's a concern.
It's interesting, the more complicated of the two, I would argue, is the Volt. Dashboard and all that stuff is just so busy. You look at that dashboard and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell how fast I'm going, because there's all these different screens is what it is. And then the Leaf doesn't have that. I mean, there are some screens you can look at, but the default is what you need. You don't have to do anything, and you just drive the thing. I think if the balance had been more Leafs and fewer Volts, I would argue that the transition or the acceptance of them might have happened just a little faster. Several of us have had just a few comments from the public. They see the vehicles, they ask questions, and to a certain extent, some of us are maybe calling us ambassadors is a little bit too strong, but we're definitely, people see us and interact with us in the course of our daily work, and they see you pull up an electric vehicle, and they sometimes ask questions. Being that it's Tompkins County, most of the time it's a very positive reaction. People are very curious about them. People are sometimes shocked when they're told that these things don't cost $50,000 or anything like that. So I think that it helps, perhaps when people see counties or other folks using these on a regular daily basis, it helps them visualize the possibility of their own ownership of a vehicle like this. It doesn't make it seem such an alien concept, I guess is what I'm really trying to say.